Hey everybody, Simone here with Bulletproof Business Growth, as always with some ideas and principles for what really to pay attention to when you are growing and scaling your business. Now, we know none of this stuff works without having an excellent team. So when you're thinking about what the first steps are or what the steps are you really need to take care of before you really pour the fuel on the fire is turning your culture from, kind of mediocre and sort of okay to really that excellent high performance culture. So it's really finding your formula to build your high performance team. So of course, it always starts with you. So it's very important you look at yourself and what you're driving, what you're modeling, but also what's the team that you have already created. So you might really ask yourself, what does that really mean? Having, a team of 8 players, all-star team, high-performance team. So a lot of times when I ask that, how many 8 players do you actually have on your team? Well, people look at me kind of puzzled and then they go, oh, I have all great people. And it occurred to me that actually many people don't really know what that means. They kind of, when things are sort of working, in their mind, that means they have an all-A team. But when we really define this, what an all-star, A-player, high-performance team of excellent people means is you have people on your team who can't sleep unless they do an amazing job for you. They wake up in the morning before they go to work. They think about how they can contribute at the highest value to the company today. They go to bed even thinking about some stuff that might have happened at work and how they can do better the next day. I don't mean they have to breathe and eat and sleep your company. I mean a little bit, but what I'm really talking about is when they go to work, they're focused. And even when they still come home, they're always looking for what are some ideas that I might have that I can bring the next day that are going to make things better, right? So we really want people who, yes, they have the capacity to do the job right, which means they have a great skill set. They have the skill set that you need, and they're going to grow with that skill set with you. But they also, and they get your company, they get your values, they get your culture. Like that, the capacity to do it is really important. But then more important is even they get it, right? They're in alignment with who you are, who your company is, so that they can help you drive better and better results, but with a value set that's the same or that's very closely aligned. So they need to have that, but then they also have to really want to do the work. They have to love doing the work. And that's a big deal because you can have great people, but if they don't love what they do, they're not going to execute at the highest level. They're not going to be the ones who are always thinking about how can we make that better. And it's not necessarily sometimes that it's the work itself that people love, but the atmosphere they're in, the environment they're in. What they do becomes almost secondary because the mission is really great, right? So there's so many things that contribute to loving the work you do, but that's a thing that you as a leader have to foster. But then also you really have to look at when you're hiring, is this something that's going to be a match for them? Do they really want it? Do they want to be there? Do they want that type of work? Do they want to show up at a higher level? But then the even bigger piece is, do they need it? Do they, for themselves, to think highly of themselves, to be happy with themselves, to respect themselves, do they need to do an excellent job? Because it's people who want to do excellent for excellence sake, right? So this is kind of being an A player is a big deal. It hits on many different levels. And when you ask yourself who you have on your team, everybody should hit all those. Skill set is almost the least of your worries. That's the easiest thing to train for. Now, if you're looking for an executive who's meant to bring, new levels of performance to your team, new skill sets, all that kind of stuff is a little different. But overall, there's so much to be said for the way people show up, the ingenuity, the creativity, and the innovation they bring to work, that's worth almost more than just having an expert. So it's a long-winded way of saying, hey, make sure you have those really, really awesome people on your team, because without them, you can't do it. So now that we defined what does that mean, well, you have to look at the people that you have. Like I said, you have to do this audit and ask yourself, well, now that I know which ones of my team are A players, the ones that are not, what are they missing? And that's an important question to ask, because it's really easy to just blame the people. Oh, I just have the wrong people. And I hear that a lot. But that's not necessarily the truth. Because if you really look at it, well, is it really the wrong people? Or do you not really know if you have great people? Because you've never really given them the clarity that they need and the certainty that they need to be well led, which means at that point they can really only be the right people. So is it that they aren't the right people, or is it that they don't have the processes, the systems, the structures that allow them to be great people? And is it that they're missing the leadership that would help them perform at the highest level and be that A player that you're looking for? So you always have to weigh those factors when you're answering that question. So now that you know what it really means to be an A player, to be at that high level of excellence, now that you know what's going on in your team, well, when you're looking at the team that you have, now you have to look at it from your business lens. Like, do they have all the it's that we just talked about? The capacity, the want it, the need it, and the get it, right? And then you have to make decisions around that, because if anybody's not hitting all those four simple elements, then you have an issue, because for one thing, it's costing you a ton of money, time, energy, and often bandwidth to keep those people on, because likely they're the ones who are not delivering at the level that you need them to, and at the same time they're costing you all that, right? So there's a lot of cost involved, and not just monetary cost with keeping those people on. And a lot of times it's an emotional thing, because they're people you've known a long time, maybe they're even family. They've helped you build this business, but the reality, the truth is they have become a burden to the business. And you also want to ask yourself, they've become a burden to me, they've become a burden to the business, and then they've also become a burden to the rest of the team, because the rest of the team has to pick up the slack. They have to fill the gaps. They have to pick up after this person who is not showing up at the level that you need them to. And oftentimes it's just simply because the company has outgrown them. You have grown, but they have not grown in lockstep with you. So you're now leaving them behind. But so that's why I'm saying you have to look at your team through a business lens, not through an emotional lens, and really understand what does the business need you to do, because the business, not just you, it's also your team, it's your customers, it's your partners, it's everybody who's impacted by when you have low performance happening. And when you don't make that decision, it's one of the biggest reasons for why small businesses get stuck in growth. So it's a tough one, but you have to get the clarity. So we want to go through a little process around this, because you want to make sure that when you have good people that you really give them the opportunity, or also when you go through the process, you've done kind of your really simple distinction that we just talked about, but then you want to make sure that you've really given them everything that you can. And that is making sure that you have given them the clarity and the certainty that they need to show up at the highest level of performance that they can really bring up. So part of that is fostering accountability. So that means you have to give really clear goals and expectations that are measurable, so that you can follow up, that you can coach, that you can hold them accountable, and then you can see what happens. Because when you do that, that's really when you see the dividing line. So you do that kind of beginning screening that we just talked about, and then you make sure that you clean up your side so that you deliver the clarity that they need to do an amazing job. But if they still don't deliver, then it's really, really important that you go through a cleanup process so that you have a clean slate, so that you can further develop your team with your new hires. So clean up what you have right now, but make sure you start with you. Make sure that you bring to the table what you need to bring to the table to up-level these people. But if they won't or can't, then we have to make different decisions, which is so, so important. So going through that cleanup process, well, what do you really want to pay attention to when you want to hire for hire, like, right? So hire for hiring up. So hiring up kind of means looking at what is the most important thing to pay attention to in these interviews. And a lot of times it's really looking at people for what they bring to the table on the inside, right? It's not necessarily the skill set thing. And Warren Buffett, I just read an article the other day where he was talking about this again. His number one principle that he looks for when he's hiring, that really guides all his decisions, is integrity. So guiding all the decisions, you have to make sure that the person that you hire is guided by the highest principles of integrity. Now, integrity is a really, really broad term. So what does that actually mean? Now, you want to help people understand what it means in your company. Now, of course, you have to understand that first, because it's really easy to just throw integrity into your culture, into your core values. But what does that mean? So does it mean honesty? Does it mean doing what you say you will do? Does that mean everybody's responsible for everything? Does that mean you don't lie? I mean, you have to define that for the company, but also really for yourself, so you know what you're looking for. So you got to walk the walk. You got to talk the talk. And of course, that starts with you. So the way you approach your team, the way you talk to them, that is going to show them how much integrity you have. But now you're in this interview, you're interviewing for that. You want to make sure that you help them understand what would command respect and influence. So when you're interviewing, you have to ask for that, because it is more important than those tangible results-driven things. And it's much, much harder to measure. So when you think about that, okay, it's harder to measure, it's harder to test for, but just think about when you drive results without integrity, what would happen? It would be tremendous chaos. You would have so many reasons to kind of go back on that and change that. So we want to look for the trustworthiness, right? The honesty. Can you really rely on them? Because when you hire for that, that is peace of mind. Like all the people that I talk to say that they want to have a self-led team because that would be peace of mind. Now, you can only have a self-led team if there's a ton of integrity all the way through the team. They have to be trustworthy. You have to be able to rely on them. And when you think about what does it mean to like ethically make decisions, well, think about the company that you are, because a lot of you, one of your biggest and most important values is that you want to deliver super high quality to your customer. So you can't really do that unless you have a highly, highly ethical team. So when you interview, you want to make sure that you ask them and that you find out how they approach moral challenges. Because when they know what that is, when they know what that looks like and what you stand for, that also means that you can rely on them, that they make the right decisions under pressure, because that's usually when it kind of all goes to pieces. When somebody is pressured, you have to really make sure that they carry this in their heart. In terms of when you look at why is integrity so important in a cultural fit, because everybody is, if that's a shared value, if everybody like lives and dies by this. If this is your aligned core value, that means you don't have nearly as much conflict. And that also means it cuts down tremendously on the drama. And that is one of the biggest reasons for why business can be extremely stressful when you have a lot of drama on your team. So, and then the other part is it's also reducing risk for you. When you look at, the kind of results that you drive for your clients, for a lot of you, when there's any sort of misconception, if there's any kind of gaps, it really takes down your reputation. You could lose like a significant amount of your clientele. So you want to make sure that you ask for that you understand, like, how can you reduce your risk by making sure that you have an integrity-driven person on your team here. And in terms of team dynamics, think about that. When you have integrity on your team, that means it fosters collaboration. It improves communication, it contributes to shared goals, and you want to make sure that people really understand what that means to them so that they can keep making an accurate self-assessment. Am I in integrity or not right now? So when you're interviewing, there's 4 simple questions that you can ask that can really show you, am I talking to an integrity-driven person here or not? First one is very simple, like, what do you believe compromises an ethical workplace? And you really want to listen for, do they understand what a high trust culture means? Because this opens up a great discussion. It opens up a great kind of fact finding here. What does this person think? How do they think? And does that align with what you already have? What it means for you, right? Second one is you want to ask, what does it mean to be an ethical employee versus an ethical company? And it's a little bit of a trick question because there should be no difference. Those things should always align, because here's the truth. If you're an ethical company and you hire somebody who doesn't think about ethics, or that's not that important to them, there's going to be a mismatch, and pretty quickly you're going to find out it's not going to work. So, and if you have an extremely ethical person who works in a company that's not ethical, very quickly they're going to be dissatisfied. They're not going to feel like this is the right place to work for them, and they're going to get out. So when you really think about it, ethical employee and ethical company has to go hand in hand. And then you can ask, hey, tell me about a time when your ethics were challenged. Now, the thing that you don't really want to hear is somebody saying, hey, that's never happened to me. Because, it's a given fact that if you've been around the block a few times, if you've worked in a few different places, if you bring some expertise to the table, well, it's really hard to avoid to have any moral quandaries at any time, right? So anybody will ever run into that at some point. So what you're really looking for is that you can talk to them about how did they avoid that situation, or did they call it out? Because you don't really, if somebody tells you they've never been in that situation, you don't want to trust that. If that never happened before, you don't want to trust them. And then here's another one that's kind of a trick question, but a really important one. You want to ask, hey, if the situation called for it, would you lie for me? And that's a hard question to ask, because nobody should ever, like in a work situation, nobody should ever encourage an employee to lie for them. But what you really want to hear is you want somebody to look you straight in the eye and say, I would never lie for you. Because that way you know that you can trust them and that they're straightforward, and that is the alignment that you're looking for, and that trust. So I know this is a very simple concept, looking for, like, when you have a high performance culture that you're building, when you're turning your culture around, but putting integrity first before everything, and really taking a close look at, is this person ethical? Do they show up with a really high level of ethics? You want to make sure that you ask for that you screen for that, and that is really first on your list of absolute non-negotiables when you upgrade your team. So I hope this helped. we have a brand new training out there, bulletproofbusinessgrowth.com/jump, bulletproofbusinessgrowth.com/jump. Check that out, and I will talk to you next time.